Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of Ready STEM Go. My name is Sarah Mellon, and I'm joining you today representing the Mizzen by Mott team. And I'm so excited to start off the second day of this virtual conference designed to shine a spotlight on resources, strategy, and inspiration to boost out-of-school time STEM programming. I'd like to start off by saying we are so thankful for you, our out-of-school time professionals. We are thankful for the time you have chosen to spend with us, gaining information on including STEM into your programs. We want to thank you for the work that you do on a daily basis to give youth throughout the country a safe place to feel welcome and challenge them to problem solve with curiosity and creativity. We hope you found inspiration from the remarkable presenters yesterday. Today's lineup is just as inspiring. Sessions will highlight unique STEM program models and provide actionable steps for out-of-school time professionals to introduce unique activities, increase equity in STEM programming, and implement facilitation methods developed to develop an engineering mindset and a positive STEM identity in youth. As I mentioned at the beginning, I am here with the Mizzen by Mott team. So one of the resources to access some of those STEM opportunities are available on the Mizzen by Mott app. So I am going to share just some additional information about the Mizzen platform with you today before we get started with our keynote speaker. So for those of you who are not familiar with Mizzen by Mott or who are members of the Mizzen community, we'll share some additional information with you today. So Mizzen is a digital platform that provides learning resources and engaging opportunities for out-of-school time professionals. One of the great things about our platform is that there is no charge to access those resources. So we provide all of the resources that we have available to those that have signed up for their free account. Our purpose with Mizzen is really to spark curiosity, cultivate joy, and inspire learning. And we do that through providing high quality, engaging learning resources for youth-serving professionals.
Mizzen by Mott is the all-in-one app platform and learning community designed for you, the practitioner and caregiver, that gives you engaging, first-rate content, fast and free of cost. Whether you need a 10-minute team builder or a 12-week module, we've got you covered. Mizzen opens worlds of discovery to young people in out-of-school time programs. With a growing library of more than 1,400 activities, weekly modules, and curated playlists. Whatever their passion, be it art and animal habitats, or building a robot, a greenhouse, or a small business, Mizzen's learning resources help them hone skills and let their imaginations take flight. Our activities, lessons, and practitioner pro tips are smart, practical, fun, and free of cost. Plus, with our ever-evolving planning features and tools, Mizzen will save you and your team precious time so you can focus fully on learning experiences and building community. Visit Mizzen.org for your free account today and join the thousands of youth-serving professionals that are sparking curiosity, creating joy, and inspiring learning.
So the video I just shared is really giving some examples and showing in real time what Mizzen looks like in practice. So the video clip showing our activities being implemented in after-school and out-of-school time settings to really give you a feel of what those activities look like once you have joined Mizzen and implement them into your programs. So Mizzen really focuses on 3 key areas of work within our platform. So the first is the content that we provide. So we have, again, those high quality, engaging learning resources that are available on the Mizzen platform. And in a couple of slides, I'll get into more detail about what exactly that covers within our content. And then what we really are happy to provide to our Mizzen users is a community around those learning resources. So in addition to providing the resources, we bring people together around those learning experiences to really support and, provide those educational opportunities in out of school time. And then experiences for you all. So that's where we, again, bring that community together for learning experiences out in the field to really implement the resources that we do have available. So what we have available on the Mizzen platform, we have three different areas that I will share with you today. The first are those learning resources. So we start by providing a vast library of learning resources that are in the form of activities. So this is an educator-facing platform. So each activity is formatted the same. It's a standard format, so you know exactly where to find your list of materials, resources, learning outcomes with each activity, regardless of the topic that you are implementing. Those activities, those single activities, are then sometimes organized into what we call collections. And so those collections are either organized as modules, where the learning is set up in a sequence and everything is organized in the way that it is meant to be implemented. And then we also provide playlists, and those groups of activities are based around a theme. So there's really not any specific order that needs to take place. They're just grouped together. So if you need specific activities around a particular topic, they're available for you in the form of those playlists. In addition to that, we have what we call our pro tips. And so the pro tips are, again, those resources that are for you, the out of school time educator. And so the pro tips are really providing information on instruction and facilitation of the activities and learning resources we provide, leadership and management of programs, as well as personal wellness and development. So there's a variety of learning resources available for you all within the platform. And one thing that we are really focused on is making sure that we're making connections between all of the information and the resources that I'm sharing with you today. So if you are looking at a specific activity, and we have resources that help expand the instruction and facilitation of those activities, you can link directly to the pro tip from the activity. So you're not searching around trying to, locate how to find those things and piece them together. And finally, within Mizzen, we have a variety of tools that are built into the platform. So you're able to create groups, and then within those groups, you are able to schedule those learning resources and activities for specific groups of youth and children that you have in your programs. That provides a planning opportunity for you also. Once you find those resources that you would really like to use within your programs, you can then do the next step of planning and organizing those activities. We also offer a feature of bookmarking. So if you're browsing our library of learning resources within the platform and you find those activities that you really would like to use within your program, it's a simple feature of bookmarking that so you can easily locate it at a later time and date when you're ready to use that in program. So the next couple of slides, I am going to share with you a little bit of a preview of what everything looks like and how it's laid out within the Mizzen platform. So the first, we will start with the activities. So on the screen, on the left side of the screen, we have a visual of the platform itself. So this is the view of the app version. And one thing I will share is that we do offer Mizzen in both the mobile version of the platform as well as the web-based version. So that really provides our users flexibility if you need to print materials or worksheets that are connected to an activity, and that's easier on a desktop. You can do that through the desktop platform. But if you're doing an outdoor activity like the one we see here from the National Wildlife Federation that has an outdoor component, if you have the Mizzen app on your mobile device, you can take all of the instructions with you. So on the left-hand side of the screen, it is scrolling through the different activities features and how that's laid out. So this is just an example of how an individual activity would look within the Mizzen platform. Next, we have the collections that I mentioned previously. And so this is where you will see how those activities are organized. So in the animation that you see here, it's scrolling through those collections within the Mizzen platform, showing both the playlist and the modules, and then how that appears once you have clicked into those modules. So on the screen, it shows the introduction and the image for the activity, and then it lists out the individual activities that are part of that collection. One of the other things to note that is key about the learning resources that we provide on the Mizzen platform is that when we provide those learning resources, I mentioned a couple of times that high quality piece. And so we have a thorough process of evaluating all of the content that is available on the Mizzen platform before it reaches the platform. And part of that evaluation includes whether or not those activities and learning resources have been aligned to any specific learning standards. So here we have listed Common Core, CASEL, the International Society of Technology Education Standards, National Core Art Standards, and Next Generation Science Standards. And those are currently the standards that we are recording as we are evaluating those learning resources for alignment with the values and the quality expectations of the Mizzen platform. I also mentioned pro tips earlier. So again, on the left side of the screen, you will see that is scrolling through the various pro tips that we have available. And we have an example here from the Pulitzer Center that really focuses in specifically on instruction and facilitation. And again, what we are working to do is link the learning resources that are provided for program with the learning resources that are available for the educators. So we are really making connections and building an overall experience for you all within the platform. And this is another demonstration on the screen. So what we are demonstrating here is the opportunity to filter through all of the activities that we have available. So in addition to the search function at the top of the platform, you also have the ability to filter through activities based on a number of criteria from the category. So if you're specifically looking for those STEM resources, you can narrow down your search and filter them by the STEM category. If you are looking for activities based on a specific duration, so if you have a specific amount of time in program and you're looking for activities that fit within that time frame, you can search by duration. So there are multiple ways that you can find and locate those activities within the platform, but then also that bookmarking feature. So when you find those resources that really fit the need, you can bookmark those for later use. Part of the demonstration that was shown on the screen also gave some examples of scheduling content. So it gives an example of the calendar and how those activities would show up once you have scheduled them for specific groups that you have created. And what I am showing on this almost last slide is more photos from the Mizzen team and our partners out in the field connecting. And so this really is a representation of what we mean when we say community and experiences around the learning resources and content that we have available on Mizzen. So various photos of us attending conferences, doing work sessions together as teams, facilitating activities and working together with those partners, because all of our learning resources and content are brought to you through those partnerships that we develop as part of the Mizzen process. And finally, on the last screen, what I have available is a QR code. So if you are not yet a Mizzen member, this is a quick access way to sign up for that account. That again, once you create the account, the sign up is a quick process and there is no fee, no subscription. All of the learning resources are available without any charge to Mizzen users. So I am grateful for the time I had with you all today, and I would like to send it back over to Rachel for the next part of the program with your keynote, Dr. Quincy Brown.
Thank you so much, Sarah. We love Mizzen and all the ways it can inspire programming beyond the classroom and how it helps make planning easy for busy professionals. So thank you for spotlighting that. Welcome, Dr. Quincy Brown, the Director of Space, STEM, and Workforce Policy in the National Council. Prior to this, Dr. Brown was a senior policy advisor in the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, where she managed the Presidential Awards portfolio, led space-related STEM initiatives, and served on the leadership team of the NSTC's Federal Coordination and STEM Education Subcommittee. She is also the co-founder of blackcomputer.org, was previously the head of programs at AnitaB.org and the program director for STEM education research at the American Association for the Advancement of Science. Her work in STEM is almost too much to put on paper, and I bet you'll have a lot of questions for her. Our conference teammates, Sheila with Ohio After School Network and Kim with Act Now Illinois, will be in the chat to help moderate and ask those questions to Dr. Brown after her presentation. So with that, the moment you've been waiting for, we are so thrilled to meet and share a part of our morning with you, Dr. Brown.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. Hopefully I'm going to do this right. Oh, hold on. Can you see it? Is that a yes?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I can see you all now. I don't hear anything. I'm like, okay. So thank you for the introduction, Rachel. It's really great to be here with you all this morning. I appreciate the invitation because what you all are doing in our communities for our young people and their families is incredibly important. And so I do serve in the Biden-Harris administration as the Director of Space, STEM, and Workforce Policy. That's as part of the National Space Council. And before I get into what all of that means and what I do, I want to share a little bit about how I got here. So here we go. So I was born and raised in the Bronx, New York. Not to date myself too much, but I was brought up in the 70s and 80s. I lived in a place called, a part of the Bronx called Co-op City. And so I have this very fuzzy picture here because, you know, when most people think of the Bronx in New York City, they don't think of green and trees. They think of, you know, lots of concrete and steel and tall buildings. And so we did have tall buildings. Co-op City can be described as like a city within the city. It's more than 320 acres, has more than 15,000 apartment units across 35 buildings. There's a shopping center. This is a picture here in the middle. There's like a really big building, which is the high school. And then there are middle schools on either side and elementary schools on either side. And so we have power plant, lots of parks. Again, you can see the green space, a track behind the school, we've our own zip code, and our own a couple of public libraries. And so very fond and also fuzzy memories of growing up, you know, quite a few years ago in the Bronx. And so I had what I would describe as, you know, for me, I mean, it was the only childhood I had, so I'll call it a normal childhood. This is a picture of me in my second grade class. And so when I was in, I'm the one, let's see, in the plaid jacket there in the middle with the big smile and the big puffs, that's me. And so when I was in first grade, my parents enrolled me in a gifted program. And back then, it was a program where there were kids from across the city who were bused to one school, and we learned together as a cohort. And so you can see from this picture here, we really did have kids from, you know, from all backgrounds, right, all across the world. They practiced different religions. Their parents and families spoke different languages. It was just a mix of cultures. You know, again, looking back on it, as an adult, I thought it was lots of fun and great to learn and really have a multicultural upbringing in school. And so, and we stayed together. I joined around second grade and the program ended at 8th grade. And so then we all went to high school separately. But in school, we did the things, you know, you might expect. We had science fairs, we participated in Olympics of the Mind. I think in middle school, I took Latin. I learned to program using Logo on the Apple IIes. If any of you all had that experience and remember those. But they also did a lot of things outside of school that I think, I don't want to say in some ways stuck with me a little bit more, but really stuck with me as well. And so, I was a toothless ballerina and did, ballet and tap. I was a brownie and a Girl Scout. I do remember, gosh, I had to be in elementary school. My parents sent me to some Saturday class about science, and we dissected brains and talked about genes. And I distinctly remember thinking they were talking about like TAMs. I didn't know what genes were at the time, but I appreciate someone planting the seed about science in me at a very early age. I played the clarinet. And as I mentioned, this is a picture at the bottom here of one of the public libraries that were inside of in Co-op City. And so again, I had a lot of experiences in school, but a great deal of experience out of school that really shaped and informed my views and outlook on life. And so I'll say in hindsight, I realized what I experienced was what some might refer to as preparatory privilege. When people see me and they learn that I'm from the Bronx, New York, privilege, especially educational, with regard to my education, is typically not the first thing that comes to their mind. But I did also attend the Bronx High School of Science. And so this is a picture of the outside there, and you can kind of see through the glass, this big, huge mural, and there's a picture on the other side there of the mural. And it features scholars such as Archimedes and Isaac Newton, Thomas Edison, Marie Curie. And so when we walked in the school every day, this is what we were greeted with. Through the work that I do now, I look at that mural and it is amazing, but realize it's also not very diverse. I mean, there is one woman on there, but there are, no people of color. There's not a wide variety of people who've contributed to science that are featured on that. And so, I didn't think about that at the time, but looking at that now, I do. That is one of the things that stands out to me. I also will note that our school did not have a football team. We did have an ultimate frisbee team, but we did not have a football team. I once tried out for cheerleading and discovered that moving my hands and feet to a rhythm and saying words all at the same time was not my strength. And so I, was not going to have a career in dance or anything that was particularly rhythmic. I mentioned I played the clarinet, and when it was time for high school, I did audition for LaGuardia, which is the high school, the magnet school for performing arts. In that audition, I learned that I'm tone deaf. And so I have a deep appreciation for art, but dance and music, those are not my gifts. And I think it's important for people to have those exposures, right? And important for people to have those experiences, because as much as I enjoy doing them, those were not, it was just me enjoying doing them. That was the beginning and the end of that. And I'll also share this next part because, people look at me today and assume that I was a great student, and I wasn't quite so much the super great student in high school. My grades were kind of average. This is a screenshot of a diary that I had when I was somewhere in high school, maybe sophomore year. And I was, pretty average, if I'm being generous. You can see the grades that I had there. They were, not super awesome. I think I'm confident my kids would be in a lot of trouble if they brought home, 55 in math and physics. But I think, I share that to say that, sometimes we look at young people and want them to have it all figured out. Like we just wish they had it all figured out. Or you hear stories or meet young people who really do, and there are many who do, but it's also okay if they're not, right? I was not. I was concerned with, going to the movies, hanging out with my friends. Pizza's still my favorite food. And so I like to think of myself as just a normal, average teenager who was thinking about doing normal, average teenage things, not all, saving the world. And so I am always impressed by young people who have that vision and that sense of purpose and clarity at an early age. And so I'll say, I knew that having a career in music and dance wasn't, going to work out for me. I'm not a sports person. Like I said, we didn't have a football team at high school. So I didn't really get into sports and that kind of thing. But when I was in high school, I did attend a program at the Coast Guard Academy, where I learned about engineering. And so behind this second red circle, I'm not the best at PowerPoint slides either, is a picture of the Coast Guard Academy campus in Connecticut. And there I learned about different types of engineering. And I became in love with electrical engineering. We used breadboards to create circuits. And so I got to use like wires and circuits and the battery and the light bulb and see it go on. And I was so hooked. I was ready to apply to the academy. I learned that all of the new students got their own computer. So again, this was, a long time ago when that was a really big deal. And so I was ready to sign up and join the Coast Guard Academy until I discovered that in order to graduate, and sometime, part of this training, because it is the Coast Guard Academy, you have to like jump off a boat and swim into the ocean. You can see the water there. I can't swim. Well, I shouldn't say that anymore. I learned to swim last summer, but I can't do it in anything more than 5 feet of water. So all that to say is Coast Guard Academy was also not in my future because it was going to require me to do something that probably would be very dangerous for me. But electrical engineering stuff. And so, at some point in my diary, I started having, talking about what I wanted to be, and I wanted to be a circuit designer, right? And so I think, it takes some people more or less time to find their passion. And I will say that, though in high school, towards the end of high school, I wanted to be a circuit board designer. I actually never designed circuit boards, like many other things, but never that. But that's always been like part of my like inner passion, and one of the things that I really always wished I was able to do. And so I'll fast forward now, a few years. I'm now part of the National Space Council, and I work on space-related STEM education and workforce policy. And so just for some context, the National Space Council is a policy team within the Executive Office of the President, and we are charged with providing objective advice to the President on the formulation and implementation of space policy and strategy. And so what all of that means is that we are responsible for coordinating across the government, coordinating with stakeholders across the ecosystem, and developing policy that supports and advances the administration's priorities with regard to space. And so as you can see here, it's a big list, but the main point with this slide is that the Vice President Kamala Harris, is chair of the National Space Council. And our council includes the heads of departments and agencies across the United States government, including the NASA Administrator, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Commerce, and several others that are listed here. On December 1st, 2021, so this has been, more than a year ago, as chair of the National Space Council, the Vice President held the first Space Council meeting of this administration. And at that meeting, she released the United States Priorities Framework. And the priorities that guide our work include areas such as the commercial space sector, national security, space exploration, climate change. And in addition to these areas, the document really speaks to the importance of space to the country for our understanding of the Earth and universe, for national security, the economy, and I think for me, even most important, to humanity. And what I really appreciate about this document is that it doesn't leave out the American people as a reason to focus on space, not just for today, but for future generations. And for us to be successful in what we do, the Vice President has added new cabinet level members to the Space Council. So there are a few members who had not been part of the council in previous iterations. And so it now includes a Secretary of Education, so that we can really work more closely with the Department of Education as we consider the STEM workforce and the education pathways for young people and learners. It also includes the Secretary of Labor, so that we can think about the workforce, and not just the workforce with regard to scientists and engineers, but also the skilled technical workforce that includes the people who actually build the rockets and capsules and satellites and space stations, such as electricians, welders, technicians, So we work closely with our colleagues across the government to do our work. And I will say that my role on the Space Council as the director of Space STEM and Workforce Policy is a new one. In previous iterations of the Space Council, there had not been anyone whose focus was STEM education and workforce. And so part of my work is figuring out what my portfolio is and what my work is, and working across the STEM and space ecosystems to advance our priorities. So at the meeting, the Vice President asked us to use space to inspire, which I think is pretty easy to do. Space is awesome. But she also asked us to identify and reduce the barriers to entering and remaining in the space workforce. And from her words, we were able to identify 3 focus areas for the Space STEM portfolio. We have inspire, prepare, and deploy. And though these really exist kind of across the, PK through grade continuum, because people really, they can be inspired at any age, right? Just as they can be prepared at any age or stage of life. There's reskilling, upskilling, training. People can be, employed or be participating in work-based learning activities or career awareness activities. But we do have these kind of 3 somewhat discrete focus areas of our work. And I think what you all do in supporting students outside of school is really important for their preparation as they kind of lead into post-secondary, I'll say, stage of life, but to really understand, how to, what options are out there, right? What training, what programs, and all of those kinds of things are out there for various careers, I think is really important. And so I'll say the first area, Inspire, is where we focus on engagement from educators, both in school and out of school, and learners of all ages. We're really here focused on, we like to say, increasing the reach of the plethora of materials that exist, and not necessarily focused on creating a bunch of new materials, because there really are a lot of good ones that are out there. And so the question that we always ask is, how do we get something that's in one community to, a community elsewhere in that state, or a good practice or program in one state? How do we scale that to reach across the country? And so that is what we're focusing on with regard to inspiration. The second area is prepare. And so we know that though inspiration is important and powerful, it's also not necessarily enough, right? People actually do need some skills and training. They need to have access to the education and training so that they can acquire the knowledge and skills that are needed and important for the space industry. And so here we have a focus on preparation. Third area is employ, because, she did ask us to, identify and reduce the barriers for people entering and remaining in the space workforce. And so though inspiration and preparation are, important, they're only going to get you so far if you don't really have access, right, to the opportunities themselves. And so there are systemic challenges and systemic barriers that can prevent people who are prepared and who are inspired from actually entering the workforce. And we also know that when people do enter the workforce, right, we want them to have thriving careers, we want them to stay, we want them to grow and advance. And there are too many people who don't have, the opportunity, or who aren't able to do that, or for whatever reason choose to not remain. And so we really want to get people in, but not just have them in, but to really, for them not to just survive, but to be there and thrive. Let's see. So next I want to share some resources with you. I'll say, and you should be able to, I don't have access to chat, but hopefully someone will put these links here that I'm going to share into the chat for you, or for me, I should say. So in September, the Vice President convened the second National Space Council meeting that was held in Houston at the NASA's Johnson Space Center. And that meeting included a focus on STEM education and workforce for the space sector. We also released a fact sheet. So there's just a snippet, a copy of a screenshot of the fact sheet that included a set of announcements and commitments from federal departments and agencies, as well as from people in the private sector. And they ranged from media resources for educators in formal and informal settings, Some of them were aimed at providing learners with hands-on opportunities and work-based learning experiences, as well as there were also some commitments that really focus on widening the aperture and making more accessible the pathways to the space workforce to ensure that those who enter remain and they have careers where they thrive, grow, and advance. And so this is a link, hopefully you'll see that to the fact sheet so you can kind of read that in more detail. I'll point out a couple of things that are embedded in there. The first is this interagency roadmap to support space-related STEM education and workforce. That is a document that describes the federal approach, so it kind of covers a bit of the context and background that I've shared here, but also identifies a set of initial coordinated actions that the Space STEM Task Force departments and agencies have committed to complete in the next year. And so we are focused on, having a strategy, but really our focus is on implementation. The what are we going to do part of it. The second piece there on the other side of the page is part of our Your Place in Space campaign. And so we have put together two things. One is a collection of space-related STEM education resources for educators. And so, as I mentioned, there is a lot of great material that's already out there. Our federal agencies and departments have, a ton of stuff, and so, but they're not always easy to find. And if you can find it for one agency, that doesn't mean you can find it for others. And so what we've done is create a web page that's hosted by the Smithsonian that aggregates a good number of materials from across the federal government, so that this way they are easier for people to find. We've also created a career profiles guide. And so we wanted people to understand that, space is amazing. Astronauts are amazing, but there are many, 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 many more careers that are related to space that are not about being an astronaut or even being a scientist. And so we have a teacher in there, we have an educator in there, we have a communications people, policy people, scientists, researchers, all of the, breadth, really highlighting the breadth of careers that are part of the space workforce. And so then the next piece I want to do is kind of talk a little bit about some ways for you to inform our work and engage with us. And so two things I want to point out, I mentioned in my, I think in the bio Rachel read, in my previous position in the Office of Science and Technology Policy, I managed the Presidential Awards portfolio. So there are two awards in particular for STEM educators. One is the Presidential Award for Excellence in Mathematics and Science Teaching. And that one is for K-12 STEM teachers. The applications will open in August. So they're closed now, but they will open in August. And you can share information about these particular awards with classroom teachers who can either be nominated or self-nominated. The process includes a review at the state level, and then there are state level finalists that then get reviewed by the through the National Science Foundation to identify state level winners. And there are two winners identified from each state. And the years alternate between primary and secondary teachers. So that's one of the awards. The other is focused on STEM mentors, and those are the Presidential Awards for Excellence in Science, Mathematics, Engineering Mentoring. And that is an award that does not require you to be a classroom teacher. And again, you can be nominated for this award, or you can even self-nominate for the award as well. And so you should receive those links for those two awards. Again, those applications open in August, and they're open, I think, for the most part from August till about January. So it's a good amount of time for people to fill out the applications or get their questions answered if they're going through the process. Let's see. So in addition to the space work that I've described, there are some other discipline-specific STEM education efforts that I wanted to share, and a few key areas. One of them is in quantum education, and so there is a lot of the math and physics. There's an entity called the Q12 Education Partnership, which is the first one there that has, again, resources, great people there to connect to. There is quantum information science, education and workforce strategy that was released last February. I guess it's been more than a year now, last February. There's also similar information about artificial intelligence education. There's an education training strategy that includes references to STEM education, both in formal and informal settings, as well as a nanotechnology strategic plan that also has an education component. And so these are all, resources that, kind of highlight what we're doing in the federal government with regard to STEM education that have a connection to the work that you all do. Again, a few more links here. The first one is the current federal 5-year strategic plan for STEM education. So every 5 years, the Committee on STEM Education, which is an interagency committee, publishes a 5-year strategic plan that really guides the work that we do across the federal government. The current plan is set to expire this year in 2023. And so there's a link there for you to kind of take a look at the current plan. There's also a Gender Policy Council. So again, I'm the National Space Council, but there is a Gender Policy Council that has a focus on gender equity and equality. And there is a national strategy that includes a STEM focus, includes STEM as a focus area of that. I've included a document on veterans and military spouses, which might be helpful information as you engage not just with young people, but also their families and other parts of the community that has some good information there. And so the Teacher and Mentor, STEM Teachers and Mentors Award that I mentioned on the previous slide, not sure why, but I have the links for that one over here. And so you can see the announcement from the 2022 announcement. That's the link to the press release, as well as the bottom 2 links there include the websites where you can read more and see information about the applications. I also included a link to the a YouTube link to the recognition ceremony, because for a couple of years, because of the pandemic, we were doing those virtually, but I think we're pretty much back to doing them in person now. So hopefully, again, you all have all of those links. The last other one I want to share is I mentioned there's the 5-year federal strategic plan that expires in 2023, which means that there will be another plan that runs from 2023 to 2028. So we are currently in the process of engaging with the public around what that plan is. And so it's a really good opportunity for people to share their insights, their expertise, their thoughts, opinions on what we as a nation should focus on, what we as a nation should be thinking about. I think there's a lot of things that are, the world is incredibly different because in some ways, not in some ways, but in many ways because of the pandemic than it was in 2018 when the current plan was released. And so, and you all have a perspective and expertise and really on the ground experience of working with young people, across the nation that's important for us to hear. And so this is a list of the dates. The first one starts today. And so, but they run through the end of the month, and there'll be some other opportunities to engage as the kind of months continue. But all of this information will be taken into account in the creation of the next strategic plan. And so there's a website there at the bottom that has much more information than this. Sorry, the font's a little small, but has much more information than this for you all to see, and has registration links to these virtual events where you can engage and share your thoughts about what we as federal government should be doing across departments and agencies. And so I think that's the end of my prepared remarks. I really do want to say that, I appreciate you all listening. As I said a few times now, I didn't know what I didn't know, right? What I do now is informed by my formal education, but I think in some ways more informed by what I did outside of school. The time that I had to explore and learn, about what gifts I had and what gifts I did not have, was really important. I think, I remember one time I was doing an event with young people, and someone asked a young lady who had raised a young person who'd raised her hand, is there a caring adult in your life who you can talk to about, needing to get some support for in one of her classes. And I think, it struck me that I hadn't heard anyone ask a child that before, right? And I think, since then I remember that moment and always think that, it's really important to have caring adults. And it wasn't that the question wasn't, do you have a parent or, a sibling, but it was just any adult. Right. And I think there are opportunities in the work that you all do and the work that we all do to be a caring adult for young people, in whichever way you meet with them and engage with them, to help them on their journey. Because, I didn't know what I didn't know, and a lot of people don't know what they don't know. Right. And so what we know, what we've learned and what you all have learned through your experiences and your training and expertise is really helpful to young people as they are just making their way and figuring out. I don't know, I showed you the picture of me when I was in second grade. I had no idea where life would have taken me, or would have taken me, back then. And there's hopefully a lot more life ahead of me that I still don't know where all it's going to lead. But I always appreciate having, having had people in my life, caring adults who, were just there to help me, as I was bubbling around, especially during those high school years. And so again, I thank you for listening. I am always interested in learning more about what people are doing with regards to space-related STEM education. So if you have programs, partnerships, opportunities, please share with. Please, feel free to send me a note. My email address is down there at the bottom, quincy.brown@ovp.eop.gov. And I think that's definitely my last slide. So thank you very much.
Right. Do we have any questions?
I'll stop sharing.
Unmute yourself and ask questions. This is a rare opportunity that we actually get to talk with someone who is boots on the ground. So please ask your questions.
I think you all are boots on the ground, so.
Well, I'll ask a question, Dr. Brown, is, well, how would you recommend maybe some resources or partnerships or maybe next steps for that out of school time facilitator who has, inspired science and especially space into one of the youth in their program? How would you recommend to continue that interest? How could they support that youth for those next steps?
Yeah, I think so. I think part of it is, and I wish I had like a perfect answer. And part of the reason I don't is also part of the challenge of what I'm working on, right? Making sure that the connection between these steps and these moments are intentional is part of what I think we adults need to do a better job of. And so I think part of it is kind of doing that legwork, right? Not putting the responsibility for figuring out the next step or the next program or the next thing on the young person. But there are the museums, libraries, science centers, a lot of them have programs. And so some of it may be just doing a bit of legwork so that you can say, hey, you did, you had this, or you participate in this great program, or you have this interest in, space exploration. Here's, 3 or 4 programs in the community or, across the state or virtually that you might be interested in. I think, I've at one point in my life was also a computer science professor. Some of it is, it's shepherding and then also making sure you do get a good handoff, right? So it's not just the, hey, here's some links, but it's the, application deadline is, Friday, let's sit down, right? It's being able to, go the next step and making sure that it's not by accident that people, go from one opportunity to the next. So I want to make that easier for everyone to find those other opportunities, and make it easier for people to apply and engage with them. So again, if you all know of programs, please send them my way.
Just as maybe a follow-up question to that is, I hear a lot, we're talking about equity, and especially getting females and underrepresented populations into STEM. And one of the things I hear a lot is the hurdle for transportation as well as finances to take part in some of these programs. Is that anything that that is being addressed at your level or in the federal government at all?
It is. And so I think, some of this is on the policy side, in thinking about how to create policy that allows for federal funds to be used for things that people need. So an example that I'll use from my past experience is when I was a professor and had research grants to do funding to do outreach. One of the things I couldn't pay for was food, right? And so when you're engaging with young people in communities and you want to do something after school, it's sometimes it's around dinner time. And so how do you ask people to come out if you then can't provide food for them? And so getting, our colleagues and agencies to rethink policy is part of my work. I think, one of the things that, the many things I learned over the past few years because of the pandemic is that, if necessary, everything can happen virtually because, in a moment, pretty much everything shut down. And, not everything was able to, but, programs went virtual. I mean, people figured it out. And so I think the, responsibility of having to get somewhere to be part of something. I hope we don't shift out of that too far. There definitely is something, real about hands-on, but there's a lot of good stuff virtually that's happening that we should be able to be a lot more innovative so that we can open the doors and open the aperture to people who are unable to make it, right? And to really think is being there in person absolutely necessary. We used to think it was because that was all we knew, but we've learned a lot of things and how necessary some of those things are, I think are debatable now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Do we have any more questions? Let me check the chat. Okay, no more chats. One question, what words of advice do you have for out of school time providers who don't know where to start to offer space STEM opportunities or post-secondary career awareness?
You have our link. I think that's a good place. I mean, that is a good place to start. We have, information from, I think, 6 or 7 departments or agencies. And what we did was they all go to those agencies' sites so that this way it's kind of an entry point into a whole other world of materials. The career profiles, again, are real people at agencies telling their stories of what they do. And so I'm hopeful that even, those things there are a starting point, right? Or an entry point for people to begin to engage and learn more. And you can always, again, send me an email. I'm happy to share.
This is on a little different path, I think, kind of question, but since you're with your work now in the White House and with the federal government, what has been your biggest surprise in terms of kind of STEM education and especially out of school time STEM education?
I think in all the things that I've done, I have been surprised at let me see, have I been surprised? Yeah, I think I've been surprised at the silos and the disconnect, right? I mean, I have, some, fuzzy memories of kind of going through school as a student, as a learner, being part of all of these programs. It all just seemed like the adults just had it all together, and as kids, we were just floating through it all. And so now that now that I'm on, this side of things, I see that people are working really hard in what they're doing. And the connections between the points are not as direct as it feels, as it felt growing up, right? As I was experiencing the other side. And so thinking about how, that is one thing that surprised me, but also how some of that is embedded in policy, right? It's just structurally not necessarily designed to make those connections easier. And that was something that surprised me, because it just seemed like, well, why don't these people talk to those people? Or, these people can't, just share out. I mean, when you look at structurally all of the pieces and the layers that are involved, it's kind of fascinating. And that's like, oh, well, it makes sense of, how things are, in some ways, why things are the way they are, because of those kinds of issues. But on the outside, it just, you don't see that. And so the more that I learn, the more I understand about the implications of those kinds of things.
I think that's probably what a lot of people are saying is, why don't they just talk to each other? Absolutely. But there is a question in the chat. This is from Devin from Illinois. Yay, Illinois. He says, my question is, how did your higher education develop you? I know you stated you did not know what will happen when you were younger, but can you touch upon your journey through college?
Yeah, so college, I attended North Carolina A&T State University in Greensboro, North Carolina. So I was I still consider myself a New Yorker. I went down south. It was a very different environment. But A&T is an HBCU, so it's an historically Black university. And what I appreciated and always say about that experience was that being in that environment allowed me to just be a student. I wasn't focused on being a Black student, focused on being a female student, kind of having all of those expectations or all of those kind of thoughts and that level, heightened level of awareness about my identity. I was just focused on being a student. And I think that allowed me to grow in a way that you saw by my grades I hadn't in high school, and really just explore. So I majored in electrical engineering because I fell in love with circuits, and took a lot of math classes, took a lot of physics, oh, sorry, totally lost my train of thought. Took a lot of math classes, took a lot of physics. But again, it really got to develop just an environment where I could just be me and explore who I was or who I am, who I was back then. So that then when I graduated, I was confident in what I knew and confident in my abilities. And it wasn't until I went to industry. So before getting going to graduate school, I worked in industry for 10 years. And that is where I experienced a lot of, racism, sexism, right, all the isms. It, in some ways it kind of caught me off guard because I wasn't used to that. But on the flip side, I think what I did have was the confidence to realize that, none of it was me, that I knew my engineering, I knew how to program. I mean, I was just very confident in what I knew because I got to develop those skills in a much more, in a safe environment.
Awesome. Thank you. And we've got some other resources being shared in the chat. Kimberly, go right ahead, unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay. Hi, Dr. Brown. I just want to say thank you very much for the presentation. I feel like somebody was like, can we get these resources afterwards? I was like, I don't know how to capture all of these at the same time. My wonder is somewhat related to the part when you said like you didn't know what you didn't know, like in all of these initiatives of, your 5-year program, are there talks about how to provide more opportunities for educators to be able to access these? Because I think as a former educator, I think the resources are great and it's just, right, time is definitely barriers. Or is there any conversation about how to either provide this information to like pre-service teachers or how to, carve out more professional development for educators, whether after school or in school? So thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, so I would say yes. I would really encourage people to that last link there about the listening sessions, to really, like, if you have opportunities to plug into those, say all of these things there. It's good. I would say interesting, but it's good. I work here. I can say something. People are like, yeah. Kimberly, you sign into one of those, you say it, it becomes part of the federal strategic plan, right? So, the voice and input from the community matters, and really does make a difference. And so, I am always conscious and take these opportunities as I can to learn from you all about how to do this better, right? If, putting together a website, sharing the link with as many people as I can is not effective, or it's not going far enough, I want to hear from you, like what I should do, because I don't have your lived experience, right? I don't, and so I'm, looking to you all to say, you know what, like websites are great, but what we really need is X, or the people who we get our information from are, people Y, or something like that, because that's one of the things that I don't know what I don't know. And so not to be giving myself an out, but like I think that's part of it. And so part of the work that we're doing with Space STEM is on professional development for educators. And so we have engaged with some of the science associations, the math associations, the science technology centers, but to really kind of share this information out, but also better understand how to provide information, and not just how to provide information, but like what information is helpful and what's not helpful, so that we can do better. So I think it's our responsibility, right, to do better, so that it's not your responsibility to like wade through mounds of stuff to find what you need, right? Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, it does. I'm like, which was the link? So I'll go through them.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, but they have all the links, though. They'll send them out. But this is the one specifically on the listening sessions for the 5-year plan.
Okay.
And there'll be like office hours. There'll be many opportunities to engage with the Office of Science and Technology Policy that's putting that plan together.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. We have 2 questions I'm going to try to get through. The first one is, and we've got a few people with their hands raised. The first one is from MCC. It says, you stated you were in a gifted program early in your education. Do you think if you did not have access to that program, you would have found your way on your higher education and career path? Second part, what recommendations can you make for those who have not been identified as gifted, but want to pursue a career in STEM field other than being involved in an OST STEM program?
So, I mean, I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't been in that program. And there certainly are friends of mine from growing up who are doing amazing things who, were not in the program. So I might have ended up in the same place. I think that what that program, afforded me, I think for me is, I think about more of the, not going to my neighborhood school allowed me to go to school with kids from all across the Bronx. from all different backgrounds and cultures. And so I think that is the part of those years that stuck with me more. Because actually in middle school, I went to the neighborhood middle school. So we were part of the neighborhood middle school. So I got bused out of my community for those couple of years in elementary, but then got to stay in the community, and everyone got bused to my community. So I don't know what would have happened, but again, I did not really hit my stride until college. And so, and when I discovered electrical engineering, it wasn't because of what I was doing in school, it was because of a program that I participated in out of school, right? And so I think if I imagine or hope that I still would have had the out of school experiences, because those were the ones where I, played the clarinet, learned I was tone deaf, right? Like learned, kind of helped me to find my way through what was happening outside of school. I think a little bit more than what was happening inside of school. And then remind me again, the second part of that is for people who are not in those programs. Was that the question?
Yes, for people who have not been identified as gifted, but want to pursue a career in a STEM field other than being involved in an out of school time program.
I don't think that being identified as gifted is the key, right? I don't think that I'm going to say this year, being part of a STEM program in the out of school time is the key. I don't think there is a key. I think it is about I think the first question that maybe Kim asked, about these pathways and understanding that there are opportunities. I mean, when I started in electrical engineering and, aside from that one program that I did at the Coast Guard Academy, I didn't know what engineering was, right? I think there are enough opportunities, and hopefully there's the access to programs, post-secondary education opportunities is widening, so that people who don't have all of this preparatory privilege, or people who haven't been part of a large number of programs, can just feel welcome and have an entry point, right, to being met where they are, knowing what they know, and then they can just kind of come in and grow from there. So that is the goal. I know it's not the reality everywhere, but hopefully it's a reality in enough places where people can have those on-ramps.
Thank you. And we have 2 participant questions. We're going to go to Wesley and then Deandra.
Hello, thank you for your presentation. I wanted to go back to what you said previously about affecting policy, especially with government funds. I run a Department of Defense STEM education program and have applied for several and received like NASA grants and in-depth grants. And a lot of times those are for out of school and after school programming. And the limiting factor there, as you said, some of those students, do not have transportation, which is a limiting factor to going back home or getting there, and food insecurity. So is there anything on at the executive branch that they're doing to maybe affect that policy? I know some of that is rooted in tradition, that, hey, you can't use government funds for this, but if we're looking to reach marginalized students, we're going to have to rethink that. Is there anything the executive branch possibly is doing to influence that policy?
So one of the things that we're doing is, I mentioned there's a task force. So like our task force has members from DOD, members from the National Science Foundation, also members from like Joint Chiefs of Staff, members from USDA. And so it's not always, one agency or one funding source that can do all of the things, but it's also making the connections across, so that, where the awards that you have might not fund food, there are programs out of USDA, right, that are focused on providing food. And so helping on the federal side, people to understand each other's work and how they can partner to provide a whole solution is kind of the approach that we're using in the Space STEM Task Force.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Deandra.
Good morning. So as you were talking about your transition as far as the kind of like the accessibility that you had and how inclusive your parents were. So we're working on trying to get our parents more involved and more aware with STEAM as a whole. What advice do you think that you can be able to provide or resources where we can be able to get our families more engaged or to increase their awareness about the opportunities that are available for STEAM?
So let me say it. I love my parents. They, you know, I am not able to ask them, you know, why they put me in that program in first grade, but they did, and I'm appreciative for that. You know, my dad drove me around and dropped me off to, you know, different things, but they were not the, you know, let's sit down and look at this. They were of the like, go do your homework. Make sure you bring home good grades kind of folks. And so, you know, they themselves were not college educated or are not college educated. And so I think, you know, again, we were pretty average in that sense. One of the things that I always appreciate doing in my work is inviting parents and families into the work, into the programs. And so it is, you know, you have time obviously with the young people, but then it is, you know, having an evening where the adults get to like write some code or do computer science, so like do Scratch or, you know, use a, you know, 3D printer or just to kind of, you know, make it more real and accessible for them is one of the ways that I think I've tried to approach, you know, bringing families into the work. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. And Deandra didn't say it, but she said, woohoo, HBCU alumni. That was in the chat, and I was supposed to throw that out there.
All right, Aggie Pride.
Any more questions? Okay, Katie, go right ahead.
Thanks, Sheila. Hi, Dr. Brown. I found that a lot of youth, when I talk about careers in space, get very scared, and all I think about is an astronaut. So what kind of advice do you have to get youth more interested in careers in space and not thinking that this is something they definitely cannot do?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't even do roller coasters. So like astronaut, like I'm very grounded to the earth. I think getting them to understand what space is, right? The space is also satellites. And so if you like to design and you want to do things with satellites, that is space. It's also about, you know, using data, Earth observation data that's, you know, are things that are come from space. I may not be saying this correctly, but Earth observation data that we have because of satellites, right? Because of space, to really address the problems and challenges here on Earth in their communities. And so I like to talk about Space for Earth is as, you know, a reason for people to be engaged in space, because, you know, space is people are addressing challenges related to, you know, human space flight, commercial space that really have implications for what's happening here on Earth today in communities. And so I think getting people to kind of understand beyond astronaut. And the other thing that, you know, I am fascinated by is, you know, what the astronauts are actually doing up there, right? So it's one thing to be an astronaut, but it's like, they're not going up to space just for the sake of going up to space. There's a lot of science, there's a lot of research that happens in space. And so, you know, though they may not, you know, aspire to be the astronaut doing the research, there are things that happen in microgravity that we're learning about that are enabling us to have new medicines or new treatments, right? That are happening in space that astronauts do while they're up there, that they could get the astronauts to do their experiments in space, right? If they have those interests. And so I think it's really kind of getting people to understand far beyond the astronaut themselves, you know, what all of the opportunities are.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions? Ooh, I'm like so excited. And okay, well, we've got one. And, oh, well, she's asking, did everyone see the new spacesuit this morning in the news?
I did not.
Yes, she said a top-notch designer has been hired to do the intricate sewing needed for the spacesuit, and designers are needed for space as well. There you go.
Designers are needed, ergonomics. I mean, there's a place for everyone in space. So our logo that I shared earlier was your place in space. I mean, there really is a role for people with all sorts of skills and expertise and backgrounds to be part of space because, yeah, I'll stop there.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. And I had said this earlier, and I'm going to say it again. I've been fangirling because all of us who organize the conference, we are part of the 50 state network, and we are working on the Million Girl Moonshot. And our goal is to engage 1 million girls in STEM. And a part of that goal is representation. I'm fangirling because you are a woman and you are a woman of color. And that makes me excited because that's what we want our youth to see. We want them to be exposed to women from all walks of life, from all nationalities, who represent the roles that are being filled. So that's why I'm fangirling, and it's just like, woo! I've been chatting with my granddaughter, who's actually in school, but I was like, oh my gosh, look what mama's doing. And she's like, that's so cool. So, I'm fangirling because you are a part of the representation that we want our youth to see. And so we are all so very grateful for you taking your time to be here with us today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation. I talk about, my work as service, and I really do, feel that I'm here to serve. And so, I ask you to, help me do my job better, right? Because that's really, it's not about me, and not that any of us are old news, but it really is about your granddaughter, right? It's about, it is about the future generations. I'm hopeful will take good care of me when I what I need them to.
We got to get them together so they can take care of us, right?
Yeah,
right.
yeah. I need them to be well equipped to handle all this, in 50 years. So,
right.
But thank you very much for having me today. I really appreciate it. Again, I really do appreciate the opportunity.
Great. Now I'll do one more call for questions before I begin all of our wrap-up announcements for this session. I see a lot of thank yous in the chat.
I hate that I can't see it.
I know. So lots and lots of chat. And I'm sure we should, we'll probably be able to send it to you maybe, just so you can see some of the comments and chats, just so you'll have that for you. But thank you, Dr. Brown. Again, thank you. So everybody, aren't you excited? Woo! And you all know Sheila is always hyper and just excited about what we're doing. And here's what day 2 of Ready STEM Go holds for you. We have 3 sessions coming up at 9:45 Mountain, 10:45 Central, and 11:45 Eastern. And if you're an administrator, you're going to love discussing how to fund your STEM program with Connie Duncan. If you're looking for strategies and suggestions to infuse more engineering into programming, you're going to meet with Hannah Lakin of Acres. Yay, go Acres. If you've been wanting to get into entrepreneurship experience for your out of school time youth, look no further than Liz Nuskin and Kelly Bigger to give you a leg up you've been hoping for. Later in the day, we're going to have a panel discussion on innovative solutions to still be able to offer high quality STEM experiences when you're understaffed. We all know since the pandemic, a lot of programs have been understaffed and programs are struggling really hard with trying to get staff in. So this panel is going to be moderated by Kenny Riley Sr., who is the director of out of school time programs at the Carol Robinson Center for Learning in Chicago, Illinois, and includes panelists from 4 states. We will also be welcoming Kai Brett with Afterschool and Summer Program Solutions, showcasing how to close the gender gap with girls who code. Last but not least, Amanda Gutierrez, who is a member of the 2022 Million Girl Moonshot Flight Crew, will be sharing a few words on her experience with OST programs and how professionals like yourself have positively impacted her STEM pathway. And for all of my Ohio peeps, you know we have a flight crew member now. Woohoo! And you'll be getting to meet and hear more from her later this year. So we have a full lineup, and we can't wait to introduce you to all of the amazing STEM professionals that have gathered to support your programming. Remember to always feel free to ask questions in the chat box of each session, and speakers will answer them at the end of each presentation. Don't be shy. All of us from the 7 states who are presenting are also here in the program, so you can ask us questions. We are here to help. When sessions are on a break, there's a forum where you can see the participants in the conference room from across the country and chat with people as well as speakers. Make sure you chat with your peers from across the country, because they're going through some of the same things that you are in your neck of the woods. And it's a great way to say, hey, you're in Montana, we're in Ohio, how are you dealing with? This is what we're dealing with. Let's see. Be sure to visit the virtual exhibit hall to browse the OST resources and enter for a chance to win one of 10 50 virtual conference gift cards by visiting the Mizzen by Mott booth and the Power of Us booth. Thank you so much for joining us today. We will see you in the next session that starts at 9:45, 10:45, or 11:45.